right, welcome everybody. Welcome everybody joining us online as well. My name is Michael, and this is Monday Night Zen. I usually just ask, is there anybody here for their first time? Anything in particular bring you on Monday night? Have you got other classes here, other things here?
No, I've not. I knew someone that had tried out before and I've had recommendations.
Oh, awesome. Welcome. That's great. So this is Zen. So with the Zen tradition, it is really focused on the breath. So, we're breathing in and we're focusing on the breath in, and then we're breathing out. And in many ways, it's like when we look at our daily life, things arise and things fall away. And there's the teaching of impermanence, and every breath is different. Just like every moment throughout your day is different. And so we're really just focusing on that breathing. And when we get distracted, as when we sit and finally really push ourselves to be in the present moment by sitting, a lot of distractions can come up. We start to hear all the noises around us and all the activity, and it can be distracting. And that's the way it is. It'll always be that way. We're just breathing. And when our focus is taken away, we go back to focusing on our breath. And, that's all these feelings and emotions can come up, but we're not reacting to them. And so kind of translates to our daily life, where we have a lot of feelings and emotions and preferences that come up. And the goal is to not react to them and understand that all those feelings and preferences and likes and dislikes, they arise and they fall away, and they're not permanent, much like the self in Buddhism does not exist. Hence the teaching of impermanence. So when we're sitting, if you're on a cushion, you can move towards the front of that cushion. If you are in a chair, you just want to sit up. You want to be comfortable, but you also want to be aware of your posture. You want to be aware, that you're trying to have a straight back, but if you were to slouch, you'd want to be aware that you were slouching to straighten your back. You don't want to be comfortable to the point like you're watching television. That makes sense. So, and like I said, we're just going to focus on our breathing. Does anybody have any questions about anything in general? Sitting, Zen in general? Okay. All right. So we'll start with our first sit, around 20 to 25 minutes, and then open it up to see if anybody has any questions or any reactions to sitting that they'd like to share. I think it's important just to also open it up to, it's important to understand to some degree like what you're doing and why you're doing it. So if you have any questions concerning that, I'd like to answer those questions as well. And if not, then I can always share some words on something, and we can go back to another 20, 25 minute sit. Does anybody, I'll ask one more time, but does anybody have any questions or anything like to add or anything to say? Let's share a few thoughts then. I had just a couple of things I was thinking about. I'll start with just an entry point. What was it? Out of a Thich Nhat Hanh book, but about perceptions. I would say start with this. It says, we act on the basis of wrong perceptions all the time. We should not be sure of any perception we have. When you look at the beautiful sunset, you may be quite sure that you are seeing the sun as it is in that moment. But a scientist will tell you that the image of the sun that you see is the image of the sun from 8 minutes ago. Sunlight takes 8 minutes to reach the earth from the sun from such a long distance. Also, when you see a star, you think that the star is there, but the star may have disappeared already, 1, 2, or 10,000 years before. We have to be very careful with our perceptions, otherwise we will suffer. It is very helpful to write on a piece of paper, are you sure? And hang it up in your room. In medical clinics and hospitals, they're beginning to hang up these kinds of signs. Even if you are sure, check again. It is a caution that if a disease is not detected early, then it will be very difficult to heal. The medical doctors are not thinking in terms of mental formations. They are thinking in terms of hidden diseases. But we can also make use of this slogan. Even if you are sure, check again. We have made ourselves suffer. We made a hell for ourselves and our beloved ones because of our perceptions. Are you sure of your perception? There are people who suffer from a wrong perception for 10 or 20 years. They are sure the other person has betrayed them or hates them, even though the other person has betrayed only good intentions. A person who is the victim of a wrong perception makes himself and the people around him suffer a lot. When you are angry and you suffer, please go back and inspect very deeply the content, the nature of your perceptions. If you are capable of removing the wrong perception, peace and happiness will be restored in you, and you will be able to love the other person again. I thought about coming into practicing Buddhism. Something I learned early on is we start from where we are, or you start from where you are. And, you can't compare yourselves to other people. There's another program I was a part of where they said, don't compare your insides to somebody else's outsides. But, I think, we're driven by our perceptions, and we have a lifetime of having those perceptions and those beliefs of ourselves, of other people, of situations, maybe of institutions. And ultimately it's attached to the self. It's what we think is permanent. And, Buddhist teachings, nothing's permanent. Everything's impermanent. Everything's always changing. It's dependent origination that nothing happens in and of itself. It's just endless causes. It's beginningless time and endless time. You can't track the start of something, and you can't track the end of something. And it all starts with I am, or I, these attachments. And when the Buddha would be asked questions about this, he would use the example of the ox cart, and that if you took the wheels off the ox cart, would it still be an ox cart? Meaning that the ox cart is made up of several different components. And if you were to remove some of those components, it would no longer be an ox cart. And that's kind of like what the self is. The self is made up of different, they're called the five aggregates, but they're made up of many different factors. And if you were to remove those factors, it wouldn't have this you wouldn't have this culminated view of the self. And these perceptions and opinions are very limiting. I was reading, because we talk about, especially in Zen, Buddha nature, and the idea that in Zen, when we sit and in zazen, we meditate and we practice Zen throughout the day by trying to engage in wholesome acts as opposed to unwholesome acts, as opposed to getting the idea of right and wrong out of our heads, because that's not what it is. It's wise, unwise, wholesome, unwholesome, and we have there's what in Zen especially is Buddha nature, and it's like the idea that we all have the potential to practice and engage in kindness and love and compassion, and I read one way it was put was that it's almost like an energy that we spend so much energy engaging in our perceptions and our opinions, and it's exhausting. I have it. I was, and it's kind of partly why I was thinking about this, was just being at work and not, being happy or content with the situation and complaining a lot. And I get to the end of the day and I'm exhausted. I'm mentally and emotionally exhausted because all I did was complain. It's like, I have to be careful because sometimes I will want to be a part of a conversation, and what other people are talking about is very negative, and they're complaining, and I want to be a part of something, and I just start complaining too, and I'm like watching myself do this, and I'm like, what are you doing? And I just do it naturally. I don't think about it. I just do it. So it's like freeing up that energy to be in a place where we're able to practice the principles of Buddha's teachings. I think that was interesting, is another way to think about it. But we all have that capacity. We all have that ability to do that, and it's difficult because something else I was thinking about too on this was it just is so easy to do, and this kind of teaching that came to my mind of you have cause and effect, and you have causes and conditions, and so past causes are going to equal present conditions. And so if for a long time I've been engaging in negativity, and if we want to be specific, about in the Eightfold Path, like right speech, slanderous speech, idle chatter, many of, to be very specific, or greed, the three poisons: greed, anger, and ignorance. Then all I'm doing is creating through those actions. I'm creating the conditions for the next moment to be exactly the same. And they become very powerful, those conditions that we put on ourselves. And I think that's a big part of just where that natural reaction comes from, are the conditions that we're constantly creating for ourselves from past actions. You could also refer to this as karma. But I think it's kind of peeling another layer of the onion away to start looking at it as causes and conditions. At least it helps me understand that more. And I think part of the practice is to see that. And we might not be able to do something about it in that moment, but it's important to see it. And I think the start of it is being aware that there's this force that I want to react to, and it's very powerful. It can be very overwhelming, and sometimes it's easier just to go with it and just to engage in that. It's craving, it's desire, It's a desire to say something, to do something, to say something about somebody you don't like. And all those feelings come up. And when we're the job, I think, when we're practicing, is not to, it's just to see it, it's to sit with it. And we're not necessarily doing anything, we're just sitting with it. And um, and it will arise and it will fall because it's not permanent. But we make it permanent when we engage in those unwholesome reactions. We make it permanent with the I. I am feeling this way. Um, and, I have to think about things in that way sometimes. I have to develop, I think it's important to develop the awareness of this process, you know, to sort of understand that process. And to understand that process, I think ultimately over time, is to understand Buddhist teachings more over time as we deepen our practice. And I think about, there are times where, I think about how do we cultivate that awareness and how do we combat, the reaction. And I think, some of that sometimes is like asking a question, asking what conditions am I bringing to this situation, and if it's anger or whatever unwholesome feeling or unwise feeling, it's about being aware of that and seeing that. Um, if it's a particular feeling, then it's not saying I am feeling this way. It's really hard to detach from the self if all we do is say I, because I feel like once we start saying I for everything, and I'm not, I do it, so I'm not saying that, but just as just being aware. If I'm just constantly using I am, then it's really hard to detach from this permanence, or what we think is a permanent self. And so a different way to approach it would be, like there is an experience of irritation happening, is to take yourself out of that feeling, where it's just a feeling, and it's going to rise and it's going to fall away. So you're going to give birth to that and it's going to die. And then there's going to be another feeling and another one and another one. It's just this onslaught. And I think it can be challenging. It can be hard to try and practice the way, as in Zen, the way every day with this awareness. But over time, what we're doing by doing this is slowly over time, even though it doesn't feel like it, creating a different set of conditions to react to, because the power of the initial feelings, that we're reacting to and attaching ourselves to, start to dissipate. They're not as strong. They're not as powerful, but you just have to do that. And it doesn't mean we'll do it every time, all the time, right? It just means that when we realize we fall off the path a little bit, we get back on the path. We're supposed to make mistakes. That's how we learn. It's a part of the practice. We're not doing this to be good at it. We're just doing it to do it. I'll stop there. If anybody would like to add anything or has a question, I'll sit in silence for a moment. And if not, then we'll sit the rest of the time.
Sometimes the emotion that is presenting to us is just a superficial emotion. For example, anger.
Mm-hmm.
We go deeper, we realize that underneath it there's fear. So if we just say it's not permanent, then we don't explore it deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And we deal with the branch, but we don't reach the roots.
It's true. Yeah, that's a good point. I think I agree with you. I think there are instances where there are certain times where feelings, emotions, things can come up that don't require looking into. But you are right. I believe that there are many times where we do have to sort of look at why we're feeling a certain way, and what does that mean? You know, like what are we afraid of, and having that self introspection, and that is important.
Seems like in the fourth noble truth, there are certain practices that are recommended to avoid the process of reacting. Meditation, ethical living, eightfold path. Can you add anything to that, or clarify it in terms of practices that you find helpful to nullify that tendency to react?
Well, definitely. I mean, within the fourth noble truth, it is going into the eightfold path, with right view, right understanding. Meredith, can you rattle off the eightfold path?
View, intention, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration.
Yeah, I sometimes forget a few of them. So I think one thing that I have realized with the eightfold path is within Buddhism everything is interconnected. So if you're practicing one of the eightfold path, then in a sense you're practicing all of them. You're not practicing, I'm going to say wise, but wise speech, like in and of itself, separate from the rest of the eightfold path. In a way, you're using all of the other seven as you're practicing wise speech. I think the biggest thing is awareness, and I think the biggest thing is, I think the most important thing initially is just to sit with what comes up, and in sitting with what is coming up, the feelings, emotions, the things that we're used to reacting to. All we have to do is see it and not react to it, and that allows for this gap, this moment, because we're bringing ourselves back into the present moment, and that allows for us to not react, and just to sit with it and to see that it doesn't have the power that we thought that it had, or that we had given it in the past. And so within that moment, it allows us, I think, to look at what a more wholesome response would be. And so now when we look at, if it's having a conversation with somebody and they're being very difficult, and you want to say something, I don't know what example, it could be anything, then you say something that's the exact opposite of what you're thinking, or you don't, if somebody cuts you off in traffic and you don't do anything, as opposed to flip them off or something. But I think it just allows for the eightfold one part of the eightfold path, whatever situation, whether it's ethical or something to that effect. I think it allows for that to enter in to that moment, and you're able to sort of utilize that practice for that moment. And every situation and every moment is different. We're never going to use the same solution or the same thing for a problem. It's always going to be different. So does that help? I'm not sure.
To add to what you said, every time there is an emotion, there is a bodily reaction.
Mhm.
The body will react, and the breath will be interfered. So if we know well the breath, we can go back to the breath, and that will allow us more easily to take distance from the feeling. Like I'm breathing here, the feeling is there. Now maybe I can react differently or not react at all.
Absolutely. If when we sit and we are focusing on our breath, we're bringing ourselves into the present moment and focusing on our breath. And there's no reason why we couldn't do that in a situation throughout our day where it brings us into the present moment and we take that pause, and, nothing magical happens by sitting, and nothing's necessarily going to change, but it is, to develop the awareness to what I think is so important is to bring ourselves back into the present moment, so to where we're not just reacting to everything and not giving a lot of thought to what that reaction is. It's easier said than done, but I think just something that helped me out a lot was you start from where you are, and you take the wins and where you can do that, and then be aware of why you didn't engage in that and learn from that. And I think that's the best we can do. You sit for the last 8 or 9 minutes or so. All right, everybody. I'm really happy all of you came out tonight. Thank you. Definitely made my night. Meredith has something to share with us.
Hi, everybody. I'm so scared. We opened the Dharmabumtemple 19 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who meet are not nuns, monks, gurus, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They're simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 4:30. With classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. We have silent meditation Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. and 12 p.m. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the sheet rack. We have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it and just bring it back whenever you're done. If you could please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out, that'd be great. And if you want to lock and close a couple of windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you well. And we'll see you again soon. Good night.